Welcome back to the Nebraskabilities podcast. I am your host, Andy, followed by my lovely co-hosts here of Nate and Zach, here to talk to you about the very ugly, very Big Ten-esque type game. Nebraska does pull out the win in Piscataway 14-13 over Rutgers, but it was not a very pretty game and the least. A very tale of two halves. First half was kind of very blah for the offense, actually. Defense was just kind of a meh blah. Only gave up 13 when it very much could have been 21 at nothing at half at least. But Nebraska finally finds a way to overcome their demons of winning a one possession game, overcoming so many of the mistakes that they had made under Scott in the past 4 to 5 years of losing those close games. And it just felt nice to know what winning one of those games feels like. I know Zach had made a post right after the game of like, let us know how you feel. What do we do with our hands type of reaction? And it's definitely how I felt of, I was like happy, but I was also like distraught and stressed of like, how is this going to end? How are we going to mess this up? Because that's what we usually do. So nice to see that finally for a change we were able to pull out one of those one possession score wins. Like I said, just, Mickey had said all last week that Rutgers is a very physical team, was going to come out, punch us in the mouth right away, be physical all day. And they very much were, even on, the second half when we performed better on offense. I mean, there were still 3 or 4 of those drives on offense where we couldn't get anything going just because a variety of things. But, Rutgers defense was still physically tough and physically ready to play that game. So, all things considered, having a shorter week, they only got one practice in essentially with full pads before they had to take off to Rutgers. So, all of that combined together to come out with a 1-point win. You find a way to do it, and we haven't been known for doing that for quite some time. So, nice to see that one of those things finally goes our way. So with that, I'll pass it to Nate for his first overall thoughts before we dive into the offense here.
Yeah, no, like you said, it was definitely not a pretty game at all. It was one of those gritty, grinded out kind of Big Ten-esque games, as you mentioned, Andy. It was definitely not the most pleasing game to watch, but at the end of the day, they pulled out a win somehow and got that W in the win column, and that's really what matters. I know we're back right around 500 and sitting at 3-3 overall, which is something I didn't think we were going to be saying this many games into the Mickey Joseph tenure, especially after the first 4 games. I was very nervous on how we would be looking against some of these Big Ten foes, but we've kind of stepped up to the plate, stepped up to the challenge, and really come out and just got the wins. And so we're back to 2-1 in conference play, right at the top of the Big Ten West.
Fake first place. Fake first place.
Yeah, as Mickey Joseph said, we're in fake first place, so doesn't necessarily count, but we'll take it. We're still ahead of some other teams right now, and right kind of in the driver's seat of our own destiny. And so it'll be interesting to see how the rest of Big Ten play goes. But right now, it's kind of balls in our court type of situation, and so I'm excited to see where we go from here, how the Purdue game shakes out. But right now, I'm pretty happy that we're actually just cruising along, getting some wins, getting some momentum moving into the rest of the Big Ten play. But that's kind of what I saw with the Rutgers game. Just my initial thoughts here. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Zach on some of his quick hitting thoughts.
I only have really 2 big thoughts kind of surrounding the game. The first one is I really like that we have coaches now that make adjustments at halftime. After the last few years of not seeing that and just trying to run the same thing and trying to do the same thing, it's nice to see that we have coaches that kind of analyze what's going on and are very much attuned that, oh, this isn't working. We need to change course. And it resulted in a win. And as ugly as the win was, we aren't going to complain about it. But the other side of that is I'm pretty sure that Thursday Night Football set off a chain reaction of scores from all of football this last week, because
Watch where you're going, Buckaroo.
some of these scores that I saw, including ours, were just like, you don't think of football as too low of a scoring game in today's day and age, but seeing Kansas State and Iowa State at 10-9 and Illinois and Iowa at 6-9, just like what it was not at all what I expected the football scores to be. But I mean, it is what it is. And like you said, Andy, ugly Big Ten game, but a Big Ten game that we came out with the win. And they, I had to laugh. They put a graphic up on the TV at the end of the game that it was our second win in a row. Like we won 2 games in a row since 2018. That's not good. But I think it kind of really shows what, that Mickey's doing, at least is doing something right. We can get obviously more into detail here, but I went from dreading the rest of the season, having faith in Mickey, but now I'm kind of up to what I'll call cautiously optimistic. I know we haven't really played the greatest of teams, but we also lost to Georgia Southern, and we're seeing a trend in the right direction. Now we just hope that it continues, and we hope that the momentum carries us into Purdue this next weekend. But with that, I will let Andy start us off, and we can talk about the offense.
Yeah, so if you want to listen to me rant about the offensive line, you can head over to my other podcast called Why Nebraska Should Hire a Coach That Builds Around Offensive Lines, Part 1 type thing.
It's kind of a lengthy title.
I know, but, we're still working on it. We're working on
it.
Long. I don't think it's any surprise that the offensive line is still trash, very much a big liability for Casey Thompson's health, the rest of everybody else's mental health for whoever watches this program play. They are going to go up against some more stout defenses from here on out. So it makes me very frightened of how this line is going to react to better pass rush, rush defenses going forward here. But, no surprise the first half that Rutgers, like Mickey had said all last week, that they came out very physical. They pushed our line around. We couldn't get anything going on offense. Casey looked like booty the first half. 2 interceptions he had thrown. First one, if he had just thrown it just like a second earlier to Trey Palmer, he had Trey Palmer just beating the defender, had a lot of open space. Instead, Casey underthrows it right to the defender for the first interception. Second interception that Casey threw, Oliver Martin went outside, Casey threw it inside, easy pick for the Rutgers defender. That one hurt a little bit more on the offense just because Nebraska was in positive territory, looking to hopefully score some points before half as we were down probably either 10. I think we were down 13-0 at that point, but that one hurt a little bit too. But, just outside of that, I mean, not much to talk about for the offense. They just looked like trash going out of the first half. Like I had texted you guys that, I'm so glad that we hired an offensive line coach to get a recruit that we never end up getting in the first place. So I'm glad that this was his first ever head coaching, or I guess offensive line coaching job where he's at the realm. And, it really shows that, he's such a great coach at doing what he's doing and developing the line. And, I think the first 6 games have proven that he is the guy that we should go with going forward there. So
I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I detect a slight bit of sarcasm there, my friend.
I was getting that too, Zach.
only
just a bit.
Slightly. I know that, I love to use Zach's favorite line to fire him into the sun. And I know I definitely told you guys that Saturday or Friday of, he is one coach that he should just be fired straight into the sun and, just, make sure the door doesn't hit him on the way out type thing. I don't know if it's just the line is bad or if the coaching's bad or if it's all of it, but I mean, it's a very big liability going forward of such a good explosive offense that our offense can be if we can block. And that is the big asterisk on this entire season on the offense is when we can block, we can do things very well on offense. When we cannot, like Friday, it shows that like the offense just cannot get anything going. And I know we'll talk about just kind of the run game. I mean, Anthony Grant had kind of a so average game. I mean, you give the ball 19 times to him for 47 yards. My bad. He couldn't get anything going. There was just no holes, nothing the entire game for him. But yeah, it shows. I think when Casey went down in the end of the first half there, we had to bring in Chuba. It was one of those things of like I sat there thinking to myself, you do not win this game if Casey Thompson, not Casey Anthony. Not combining our running back and our quarterback again. If Casey Thompson is not healthy, we do not win that game at all. So it's nice to see that he came out, won the second half for us, type thing. But if at the same time, I would also love to see, maybe you put Smothers in over Chuba to see what Smothers can do. I know Chuba is the de facto number 2 guy, but outside of the garbage time half that he had against Oklahoma, he had to come in for that Indiana drive and he gave up the strip sack fumble, which arguably is also on the line. But I would like to see, maybe Smothers get in there if we ever have to put in another backup quarterback going forward. But with that, I'll pass it to Nate, see if he has any first half thoughts or if they're just about as probably as elegant as mine were. You can go right into the second half.
Yeah, I mean, you can't unfortunately talk about this offense without talking about just how suspect that offensive line is and is going to be probably moving forward. They're really, like you said, they're a liability, and unfortunately, that makes Casey and Anthony Grant's job a lot tougher. And so, going forward, hopefully, we can fix some of those things. I think it was in Mickey's press conference. He was talking about how they were going to make sure they had the best 5 out there for the guys up front, and making sure it wasn't just the main starters or whoever. It's going to be whoever's playing well in practice, and whoever they think is really going to get the job done for our offensive line. And so, whether that actually leads to any changes or not up front, I don't know. But hopefully, I trust Mickey. I think he knows what he's talking about with this team. And so hopefully we can make some of those adjustments, and our offensive line can really figure it out and be able to block for our offense a little better moving forward. But yeah, that Rutgers game was brutal. First half was rough, just all around. Offense wasn't clicking at all. But even into the second half, you could tell the offensive line was just getting manhandled by Rutgers. And I mean, I'll give some credit to Rutgers. Mickey even said that they were going to be a physical team that's going to hit you in the mouth and really come at you hard. And so I think they really gave us their best shot, and our offense didn't necessarily respond in the best way, but they, I guess, in a sense, were more of an bend don't break, but for the offense. And so it was good to at least see that they were able to come out and clean things up a little bit. And so I guess just looking at some stats a little bit, again, credit to the Rutgers defense. They were only giving up, I think, 90 some yards per game on the ground, and they held us in check. They held us to 72 yards on the ground. Anthony Grant had those 19 carries for 47 yards that you mentioned, Andy.
Mm-hmm.
And so even as good of a running back as Anthony Grant is, they were able to hold him in check. And so all credit to Rutgers there for that. But then we really were able to kind of gash them through the air. Wasn't our necessarily best performance, but we were able to spread out the ball quite a bit. Marcus Washington had so-so game. It was definitely a better game than he's had. He was at least targeted quite a bit, and he had his opportunities to make it a great game. So that was kind of on him, where he didn't necessarily capitalize as much as he could have, but he still had 4 catches for 53 yards, which was pretty important. Had some important catches down the stretch. Trey Palmer, 4 for 64. Vokalek was actually targeted, or at least had 6 receptions, which I thought was really good to see. See him come back from his injuries, and he didn't look necessarily as explosive as he has in the past. So I'm almost wondering if he still has some of that nagging injury bug still kind of plaguing him. But he at least had 6 receptions, and he's getting utilized in the offense, and he's going to be an important piece going forward. And I think I was listening to Mickey's and Mark Whipple's pressers, and they both said that they were glad to have Vokalek back, and that he's going to be a really big piece in the offense. That they missed him those games that he was out, and so it's good to have him back. And hopefully he can get healthy. Hopefully the O-line can figure some things out, and hopefully Casey can play a full 4 quarters, because it seems like he has a good half, whether it's the first or second half. It kind of varies by game, but for whatever reason, he'll be pinpoint in one half and can just hit receivers in stride in one half, but then the other half is pretty brutal.
It's not
underthrow
ideal.
Yeah.
If I had to pick any half, I would I don't know which I would prefer, actually, but I would want the second half if we need to win the game. If he were to be as accurate as he can be, I would rather be the second half in case we need to win a game.
Yep.
Let's just hope that we don't have to, come down to picking a half, and that he can just do it going forward.
Play 4 quarters, that'd be cool. But no, it was just some of his passes were especially the interceptions, where I don't know if it was miscommunication or what, but they were just underthrown, not thrown to the right place, and
not great.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a mental thing with Casey, if the offense just wasn't really clicking in the first half. It kind of got to him mentally, and he was just kind of having a bad game as a result as well. But it's definitely something that needs to be kind of fixed, and hopefully they can move forward into the Purdue game and have a good 4 quarters. So with that, I'll kind of wrap up my thoughts on the offense and pass it over to Zach.
So I don't think I need to touch on the O-line. I think our listeners have a pretty good idea that our O-line is a flaming dumpster fire in worst best case scenario. But I won't touch on the O-line too much outside of it was just obvious that, I feel bad for Casey overall, because I know, like, in some of the cases of him having some inaccurate throws, it's, if he had just a half a second longer, that he'd be able to make a much better throw. And, credit, like Nate said, to Rutgers for basically doing what we thought they were going to do, which is play tough up front. And their defensive line, by no means the best in college football, but by no means the worst either. And they definitely showed, and they definitely showed up. So it was also nice to see Nebraska go into a hostile, sold-out environment at Rutgers. Wink, wink.
Sold out in air quotes.
Which was also...
Even Mickey commented on that.
Yeah, I was going to say Mickey commented that the game, he was like, don't, let's not lie. That was definitely not sold out. Granted, he was referring to going into Purdue and how that's going to be a much more hostile environment, which is true, or whatever. But the point being is that it was, like I said, to start off overall, though, it was nice to see specifically in offense that we did make adjustments, and that we did finally get the ball rolling finally in a turn of phrase. But overall, the play calling in the first half, I think, was just abysmal. And in the second half, it was questionable at best. I mean, there were obviously some really good plays that worked because we got, touchdowns out of the deal, but I question what we're doing sometimes, because it feels like almost that we're trying to be too smart for a situation when it really doesn't need to. You don't need to overthink it. And I know we all talked about it. We're trying to do too much for what's needed. 4th and 1, 3rd and 2. Why not give it to your bell cow back? It hasn't been working overall. Like, we haven't broken any long runs by any means. I think the longest run that was ran was 7 yards by Grant, and then Yant had a 10-yard run. So I mean, we're not looking at breaking away long runs here by any means, but all you need is 2. And Grant hits the hole hard and he runs. So, which, speaking of Anthony Grant and hitting things hard, we can't overlook him knocking that dude completely out. And just up front, I hope the guy isn't injured or whatever happened. I hope he's okay. I don't like to see players getting injured by any means, but man. And I don't know about you guys, but I was pretty sure that was what I would consider like the turning point when Nebraska knew they could win. It was spoken by Mickey at halftime. Sorry, at his press conference about halftime, that they went into the locker room and the players basically coached the coaches almost in a way, is what Mickey said, that they said, we got it. Like, they had confidence. They had the fire. They knew they could win the game. What they saw that we didn't see, I guess, is, a credit to the players, obviously, if that's how it went down. But on the other side of it, again, it was just nice to see that adjustments were made and that we came out with the W. By no means was it the greatest football game I've ever watched. No. But it was definitely fun to watch the second half compared to the first half. For me, the other thing I did like to see is that Casey specifically started off horribly, we know, and he came back and really fixed whatever was not working. And I don't know if that was, just him, if that was him and Whipple, trying to get some quicker plays because the line wasn't holding for him. Whatever it was, it obviously worked. He went 24 for 36 between completions and attempts for 232 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so, I mean, his offensive production was not terrible. The 2 interceptions really, didn't help, but, I never like to see Casey go down, obviously, because he is our main guy. But I was so nervous just for the momentum side of things when he went down for that bit there, because even though we weren't necessarily playing the greatest at the time, the amount of things that can happen to a mental state for your team when one of your star players goes down like that can really affect how they play. And I think Nebraska is finally getting to a point where, the next man up mentality is really, really kicking in. And that's not as big of a deal as we would have seen previously under Scott's regime. But still, Casey is basically, I'm going to just say he's the lifeblood of the offense. Without him, it's hard to say that we'd have the same kind of offense running in the way it is without him. So I'm glad to see he came back. I was really glad to see he's a tough dude. Both Whipple and Mickey have said that he's tough and he's going to come back in. Unless he's absolutely impossibly able to. The other thing I'll touch on, and then we can move on to defense, is that I really like seeing the spread of where the ball is going. Like, this game really showed it too.
Not the 5 wide on the 4th and 1 spread.
That goes back to the play calling thing.
That one irritated me more than the 3rd and 1. Let's run our first reverse of the year type play. That went nowhere.
That was such a wild play call. I didn't, and I think
let's not give it to Anthony Grant on either of those plays. That sounds like a super fun idea.
If the assumption was that they're going to try to trick them because they think that they were 99% sure we were going to run up the middle and we were going to try to catch them outside, I can kind of see the logic. I just don't like it there. I think that's overthinking to the worst degree, and you don't want that. Football it's not a simple sport by any means, but sometimes at the end of the day, simplicity is key. And I think there's just some questionable things we did in this game, and maybe this was more of the game to like try some of these questionable things, like, hey, how well do we run these plays, rather than doing the basic thing. I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into that, but no, the spread that I was talking about was just how well the ball is being passed around to the rest of the team. So like Casey, Palmer had 4 receptions, Washington had 4. Vokalek and Grant both had 6, and then a smattering of others here and there, and all of that for 232 yards. It was fairly, I would call it even. We're seeing the ball get to a bunch of different players and a bunch of different playmakers to get the game itself again was not pretty, but we found the way to win. And at the end of the day, I don't think anybody's going to complain about a W, especially where after Georgia Southern, I think a lot of Nebraska fans were just as jaded as I was and considered it a lost season. So it's kind of nice to see that not only is it maybe not a lost season, but I think, this will carry us into the back half of the season. And I think we're going to see some really good play, provided we can get some just keep that momentum going and just get some of these other plays and some of these other things tightened up. I think the other thing that we forgot to mention is that, we mentioned it, but something that maybe we're overlooking is it was a short week. I mean, we went from playing Saturday to Friday. And so that really kind of goofed up the practice schedule, I assume. And I guess I can't say it really goofed it up, but I'm guessing they didn't get their normal day off like they normally would, or however that works. But anyway, that's, I think, enough about the offense and how we think about it. But unless you guys got any final thoughts, but I'll pass it back to Andy.
Yeah, just one quick final thought there. I know I saw on Twitter after the game of like, we get the ball with 6 minutes left, and a lot of people are like, why aren't you more aggressive on offense? Why aren't you trying to go down, score, really make Rutgers come down and score a touchdown on the other end? And, if you watch that entire game, I mean, outside of the 2 touchdowns, the very first drive out of the second half, which another Mark Whipple staple, whether it's the beginning of the game or coming out of the second half, Mark Whipple loves to score on the first drive of either half, essentially. But I mean, outside of that, you watch the offense just kind of spit and sputter the entire game. And so you kind of saw that when that drive started of, you really can this offense kind of get a couple of those first downs, really shut it out. We really couldn't until, Rutgers made that one mistake that Nebraska usually makes at the end of games is, you get the late hit out of bounds, they call it automatic first down. And at that moment, I was like, man, that is something Nebraska loves to do in the past. We would love to make that mistake, really break your defense and break the whole mentality of the game. It's like, oh, now you get another 4 downs, you have to stop them essentially. So to see one of those finally go Nebraska's way was nice. I think Mickey did a really smart job. I know that, we had talked about it in our text chat of like, Rutgers taking those back-to-back timeouts, really something Nebraska also would have done in the past under Scott. So that kind of helped them in that sense. But it was nice to see that, we got a little bit of help there, but then, we were able to punt the ball back under a minute left and they had no timeouts and they had to drive, 90 plus yards down the field to score. Eventually, obviously, we know how that ended. Defense comes up with the interception on the second play of that drive. But, it was nice to see that offense, that Mickey realized in the moment that, okay, our offense really isn't going to move the ball that well. So how am I going to manage this game? How am I going to try to make Rutgers, get into, okay, when are we going to start using our timeout type territory? And I think he managed it pretty well. Obviously, yes, I would love to have seen our offense kind of bust a big play open. And get some more points to really kind of put it out of reach. But at that same time, we really hadn't had many of those big plays all day. Outside of the touchdown after the turnover, there weren't really like, any huge like 40-yard catches down the field. The Volkolek touchdown was only a 3-yard pass essentially. So I just don't think you were going to get that out of your offense that game. And I think Mickey realized that. And it's nice to see that out of a coach to kind of in the moment realize, okay, this is what we have to do to win this game. And Mickey went out there and proved it. But that's my only offensive point for finishing up that game. Now turning to defense, really rocky start. We saw Rutgers come down, first drive, Vedral scored, and eventually, one of those former Nebraska transfers was eventually going to come and score on us, bite us in the butt. Vedral did it with that 20-yard scamper off the read option, and I sat there and I was thinking, man, if we have to stop Rutgers like this all game, if they're going to drive the ball like this, it's going to be a long game for our defense. And I'm glad we didn't have to, especially knowing how our offense played. But, then the defense was put in yet another tough position after the blocked punt. Rutgers is already within field goal range right after that. But it was nice to see our defense step up, stop them on a I don't know how many plays it was, but, you hold them to a field goal after that blocked punt, which was, in all things considered, a win for them. And then, just giving up another field goal before half, it easily could have been 21-0 at half for Rutgers. So it's nice to see, that's kind of like my only positive of the first half of the defense was they were just able to, not totally break when they were put in those tough situations for at least that first half. Second half, they do it again, back-to-back weeks where they pitch a shutout in the second half. Really needed the defense to step up. They obviously did it, winning the turnover battle throughout the entire game, but you get those 3 huge interceptions in the second half. The first one was definitely, big. I think because Rutgers was already in positive territory. And I think I don't remember who got that first interception. I know Brandon Moore had one. I don't know if that was the first or second one, but the third one, Hardzog was picked on all game. We saw it on the first couple of drives for Rutgers that they gashed him on those two big pass plays. And I think it was nice to see that he got pulled out, kind of how Mickey did with Casey last week, pulling him out of the game and telling Casey like, hey, this is analyze the defense. This is what they're doing to you, and then we're going to put you back in. It was nice to see that Mickey did that. He realized the player was getting gashed, so you pull him out, let him kind of analyze things, and then have the confidence to put him back in. And that's what Mickey has been preaching all along is, we're going to play our best, but if you're not playing your best, it is next man up until you can prove to me that you can play your best. And that happened to Malcolm. He's a freshman. He's going to go through those growing pains and learn through that. But, obviously he got the game-ending interception, so a nice little redemption for them, for him there. But I think Mickey had said in this press conference, they had asked him, like, that second half defense pitched another shutout. You're going to talk about black shirts or anything? And Mickey, very short answer, like, nope, we're not going to talk about black shirts. And then that was the end of the discussion there for that.
I love that answer, by the way.
Very short, sweet, to the point.
I love that we aren't doing the black shirts. I know it's such a Nebraska tradition, but I think where we're at right now, it's great that we're not doing it. I am totally okay with this.
I even listened to Bill Bush's press conference today, and he kind of reiterated the same thing, where he's like, no, we're not going to talk about the black shirts, and like we have a good solid group of guys right now that are have momentum, and so we're not going to add the black shirts into that equation and try to inflate any egos. He's like, I like the rotations we have, and I like the way that things are going with our defense. So
don't change something that's working. Absolutely.
So that kind of wraps up my defensive points of like, yeah, first half was blah, but they, all things considered, kept us in that first half when it very much could have been a worse lead for Rutgers there. Worse in terms of us, but that definitely could have been 21 plus at half, for sure. So defense, despite all things, they were put in tough situations in the first half, but managed to only break a little bit. But second half was nice to see them step up. Nice to see O'Shawn starting to get a little bit more involved after how much hype he was given all off season. So heard his name a couple more times on the broadcast, which was super nice to hear. But with that, I'll pass it to Nate there. Any defensive thoughts here? You can sprinkle in special teams too, because I mean, outside of the huge blocked kick, I'm not sure how much of special teams we really need to dive into.
Yeah, I don't have, I guess, too much to add. Defensive wise, it was, I mean, yeah, that first drive wasn't pretty. Definitely didn't come out the gates swinging or anything. But I mean, after that, it really felt like the defense kind of settled in, gave a couple field goals in the latter half of the first half there. But overall, they seemed like they adjusted well, and only in the grand scheme of things, yeah, we only gave up 13 points, which, I mean, given what we had seen in the first 4 games, is again just something that I was not expecting. We gave up 45 to Georgia Southern, 49 to Oklahoma, and I figured we'd just kind of keep chugging along, giving up points, defense, having our offense try and bail us out. But really, this week against Rutgers, it was more of our defense that really kept us in the game, and so that was encouraging to see. And so we, I said we held them to 13 points. I'm not sure what. Take a look quick at what their total yards, 348. So I mean, yeah, they outgained us, but it defense really was able to keep us in it still, and they came up with they won the turnover battle, which was really big. And instead of being down 13-0 at halftime, or being down even more than 13-0 at halftime, we were only down 13-0 at halftime, and so it wasn't necessarily an insurmountable lead that Rutgers had. And that was all because of our defense stepping up and making the adjustments they needed to really keep us in the game. So that's kind of my positives and my insight with the defense. Special teams. I mean, they had the blocked punt, but I think the bigger thing is Bushini is apparently playing with a broken foot, which seems pretty counterintuitive to punting, but apparently he's getting the job done. It's not affecting him too much, I guess, but hopefully it's nothing too severe and it's nothing that's going to affect him, I guess, moving forward. But I guess that'll be something we'll have to just keep watching moving forward. But I guess that's kind of my thoughts on the special teams and defense. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Zach.
Yeah. So for me, one of the big key things that I took from the defense, this is really specific, but I'm looking at the stats here, and third down efficiency for both teams was terrible. We went 4-15, but they went 4-16. Now, something that this brings up to me though is that every time that we would see like a 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 10 or whatever, 3rd and long, essentially, that in the past, before Mickey took over, I in my head was just like, well, here comes our first down. I always almost had it in my head that our defense, maybe except for last year, but that our defense was just not going to get a 3 and out, or even if it wasn't a total regular 3 and out, that they weren't going to get that the third down was basically a guaranteed first down for the opposition. And it was really nice to see that we not only are able to hold a team to 13 points, but shut them out in the second half. First of all, that's a total switch from what we've seen from the beginning of the year. And second, that now when a third down comes up, that I'm not sitting there, holding my breath or just already giving it up thinking, oh, well, I guess, here comes a first down for them. That's really nice. And I think I never expected to be able to say this, but the defense, and you guys both said it, the defense is what kept us in the game. By no means did Rutgers necessarily play amazing or lights out other than that first drive. But it it was quite interesting to see that the defense was the one that kept us in the game. And it was nice to see that the team, rallied kind of around that. Like, the offense couldn't get anything going, but that didn't stop the defense from doing what they needed to do. Yes, they, had a couple big plays that Rutgers broke on them, but that was the other thing, is that I didn't see, outside of maybe 2 or 3, that were huge plays. And even then, I think after, the main score in the first drive for Rutgers there, I didn't see any big play that even really deterred the defense. Like, yeah, it obviously was like, oh man, we need to go back and stop them. But then they did it. Like, they might have got a field goal off the thing here and there, obviously, to get to 13. But like, our defense just did the thing. And it was nice that they just did the thing. And I know Andy touched on it, but it was also nice to see, as much as they were picking on Hartzog there at the beginning, that he did get pulled out for a bit, and then he also came back and got himself some redemption. He did come back in earlier than that interception, obviously, and was able to make some good plays. I think he even broke up a couple passes, or at least was defending his man. So it was like, whatever the coaches are doing, defense, offense, whatever, they're obviously getting through to these guys, and they're making real-time adjustments, not just to the team, but to the players. And maybe that gets chalked down to Rutgers losing the steam they had from that first drive. I don't know. But I don't really have too much else to add on to what you guys have already said for defense. Looking at the special teams, obviously the blocked punt was a pretty sore spot, but didn't let it deter us, obviously, too much. We have a note here. Yeah, we overcame the deficit in that regard. And it's also great that, I think now, with hindsight being what it is, obviously, that at halftime, if Scott was still our coach, I am 99% sure. And I think we've said this the last however many times now, but I'm 99% sure we would have lost that game.
So that brings me to a very interesting point, Zach, because I had wrote this down as a hypothetical, as I had kind of pondered over the past couple of days here. No, you guys can see that question too, but I'll pass this to you after I ask it, because I want to hear your guys' thoughts too, outside of my own that are in my head. If Scott's fired at the end of last season, like how most of us wanted, if they bring in Mickey Joseph, Or you can, this is totally hypothetical. Does this current coaching staff or a brand new coaching staff that does come in, do you lose to Northwestern? Do you lose to Georgia Southern? You're more than likely going to lose to Oklahoma, no matter who is coaching that game. But do you lose those two games that you should have won with either this current Mickey coaching staff or this Mickey's coaching staff, or whoever gets brought in, does that current coaching staff also lose to those both two teams? Can you kind of apply that same logic to the losses last year? Does this coaching staff or a brand new coaching staff lose a lot of those one score games last year? Because last year's team was much more talented, regardless of the outcome of what they were proved. And, hindsight's now 2020. You can look back and say a lot of those were probably on coaching, a lot on Scott, type thing. But that's just kind of the thought that I've had through the past kind of couple days is, can you apply what Mickey's doing now to those first couple games? Do you lose those first couple games either with Mickey or a brand new coach type thing? I'll pass it to Nate here, see if you have any thoughts about that, because that's just kind of what I've been racking my brain about the past couple of days. It's really kind of made me mad, is because knowing what we know now, it's like there's a very good possibility you win some of those games, even if you apply it to last year.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. And I mean, I would tend to agree that I think a lot of that comes down to the coaching and just the mentality. I think a lot of the players latch on to the kind of that mentality of the coaches. And so I think when it comes down to some of those tougher games, some of those closer games like Northwestern, Georgia Southern, and even into last year, all those one-score losses that we had, I think it's a mentality issue and a coaching issue. And I would tend to agree that if Scott is not there to start the season, I think a couple of those games could have flipped the other way. But then I also wonder if we would have been able to get Mickey when Mark Whipple if we don't have Scott there this year to start the year. And so I guess that's kind of where the hypothetical part comes into
Right.
play. But I definitely think it is a mentality thing. And I think I could see how a lot of those close games could be definitely different than how they turned out, unfortunately. And
because
we could be undefeated in
you don't get the onside call if Scott's not the coach. And that's
Correct.
the part that is frustrating me so much. It's like I know I'm latching on to this one stupid play, and I know I tweeted it out when it happened. Is that onside is going to haunt us for the rest of the season.
But that's such a microcosm of what Nebraska football has been. And I know
it's that play does not even happen if Scott is not the coach.
That play it unfortunately defined what we all knew was the case, I think. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that going with this hypothetical, and sorry, Nate, I'm taking over. Sorry.
Oh, go for it.
But if for anybody that knows me personally outside of you guys, knows 100% that if you want to get me fired up about anything Nebraska football, especially this year, is all the rumor mills surrounding our previous coaching staff. And I'm saying rumor mill because obviously I don't have the inside sources. I don't have any of the detail if any of this is even true. But I'm a big believer of where there's smoke, there's fire. And if even half of the things that have been coming out are true, that I'm not going to do it now, but it just makes me ball my fists up and I want to scream because it's dude, you had the chance of a lifetime to be a god among men in Nebraska. All you had to do is take the job seriously. And I'm not putting down Mickey at all when I say this, but you can tell that Mickey is taking the job serious. We may not have the most talented team, but we've got a team now that went out and won 2 games when after the Oklahoma game, we thought we were not going to get a single other win. Mickey, in my head, in a way, almost did something akin to impossible. He took a team that has no business winning, I guess, and he's given them 2 wins in a row, something we haven't done again since 2018. There's a lot more that goes into it. And so then putting that with the hypothetical, yes, obviously, I think Northwestern would have been a win because Northwestern should have been a win this year, even under Scott. Mm-hmm. Georgia Southern probably would have been a win. North Dakota would have been probably a conceivable win, as in that one. I don't think we would have had too many questions.
Not
Like we did this year.
More
Yeah.
decisive, yeah.
Yeah, not 7 at half or however close it was at half.
Yeah.
Type game.
And it's just, I don't want to get too far into the weeds of that discussion, because every time I do, I start getting even more and more angry, because it's like, if either one of us, and I mean, I know the three of us don't know how to be a head coach of a football program, no offense, but like, if we were offered, hey, you can make $10 million, you know damn well that anybody that's put in that position would at least try. And if the rumors that have come out around the previous coaching staff are even half true, or even a quarter true, it's just, it's frustrating, because it's like, we had to endure 4 years because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I know that wasn't quite what you asked, but, in regards to the hypothetical, I really wish we could have seen what this year could have been under something different. And the worst part is, had we fired Scott at the end of last year, like you guys said, I don't know if we get Mickey, I don't know if we get Whipple or Bill Bush for that matter. And it's just like, maybe this is almost like the perfect storm that we needed, but I don't know. I am excited to see where we go from here. I think, though, with that, I think it's awesome to see that now we're finally the team that is the one that, if we win, we're getting coaches fired. The offensive coordinator for Rutgers got let go after our game. Like, Nebraska did a thing, guys. What do we do? Also,
we're finally that team.
And I mean, I think it just shows that we're trending in an upward direction. That upward direction may be a long trend. It could be 4 to 5 years before we see something. But going back to an old previous conversation we had with the transfer portal, we might see success in 2 to 3 years. It might be kind of that hip, that skippy kind of, up down, kind of like Michigan State this year kind of success. But I think we're going to see. I think we'll have more success. And I think I said it earlier, is I'm now officially cautiously optimistic for the rest of the season, not dreading the rest of it, which is great. And I mean, if you guys have any other thoughts, because I do like the hypothetical discussion. But
no,
I
just wanted to pick your guys' brains, because it's been racking my brain.
This isn't a hypothetical, but I know something. Speaking of, since the game ended, I know something that we can talk about. 18 penalties and 4 offensive pass interferences.
More egregious than the 3 intentional groundings last week.
Yep.
And okay, like, I know we were talking about them because they would show them. And also on top of this, I thought the commentators were awful.
That all of that broadcast, all of that ref show was a disgrace.
I was
it was a Big Ten Friday night game of 2 not great teams, but like, none of it was good.
I was just not having it. But I tried. So when penalties happen, I personally try to be objective. Like, obviously I'm a Nebraska homer, so I'm going to be like, that's definitely not a penalty. But when they show it on TV, it's like, no, if you see it, if it's a penalty and it's obvious, you got to call it. Like, you got to play the game fair, and I want to see Nebraska get better and stop committing these penalties. And I do the same thing for Rutgers. Like, if there's a penalty that they have that doesn't look like a penalty, speaking of the offensive pass interferences, like, were they just seeing something different that we weren't? I'm so confused.
They were very ticky-tacky. The positive of that is I'm glad they called it both ways. But that's the only spin zone you can take on that. Outside of that, I don't know if any of them could have been called. Definitely 2 of them should not have been called. The one on Trey Palmer, and then the one that got, like, that the crowd at Rutgers was still booing about, which I also agreed was not a good call at all. But they called it both ways, so I can't really be mad about that. But yeah, no, they were very ticky-tacky offensive pass interferences. You maybe see 1 a game, whether that's college or professional level. The fact that you had 4 in a game, I think 3 in the first half alone, was not ideal, not great on that Big Ten ref crew, but I digress. about that. But yeah, back to you. I don't really have much more to say about the refs because that will only make me more mad.
I'll give it to Nate because I know you look like he said how you wanted to say something.
Oh, I didn't have too much other than, I would like to fire those refs into the sun as well.
And I'll admit, maybe Nebraska is just not going to a more aggressive play style, like Mickey even said. We're probably going to see more of these. That's fine. But like,
maybe we should do a weekly thing of who is our top contender to fire into the sun.
All right, so this week it's the offensive line coach, or is it the refs?
God, that's I don't know who was more atrocious is the issue.
I'm gonna say the offensive line coach takes the win for this week, just because the the refs are probably not going to be the same ones next week, so we may have a better
I very
showing
much
with
hope
that.
not. It's a battle for the first place position in the Big Ten West. We deserve a good Big Ten crew.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess, since I'm kind of here, I guess my overall thoughts, though, just to round out the game is, we won, and that's exciting. We've won 2 in a row. We've got a lot of momentum riding. I think we have an extra day, or we've had an extra day now to prepare for Rutgers, or to prepare for Purdue. And I think now we're, I don't know. I'm excited to see where we go, and I know Purdue. What's really interesting is that as you look at our schedule, outside of maybe the last 2 games, we have a ramp up in teams.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost a perfect storm the way it worked out, because Purdue is next, and we have to see how they're going to be, and then after that, we can hopefully we can keep building momentum and keep beating these teams. Now, Michigan might be the one outlier where it's like, that one's going to be tough, but they also looked beatable. So,
and this was the part of the schedule that we had even talked about at the beginning of whether you come in, like what we were saying, like whether you went into the 6-0, 5-1, 4-2, like this was the part of the schedule, regardless, where everything was going to get ramp up, and like every fighting for, what we're doing right now, first place in the Big Ten West, like everything was going to ramp up at this point of the schedule. So obviously a lot has changed with that in terms of coaching circumstances and all that, but the point still remains that, this is where the rest of your season will be made. Is now this team is fighting for something, thanks to everybody else being bad in the Big Ten West. Bless up for that. But it's just one of those things where it's kind of true of what we said, like, oh yeah, like we're going to be fighting for everything at this point. We're doing it at 3-3, but point still remains that, like you said, Zach, everything ramps up. Defenses get more stout, they get stronger. I know I wrote down that, Purdue's defense is top 20, like I think exactly number 20 in the nation stopping the run. They are only allowing 97 rushes, like rushing yards a game. Not so good against the pass. I think they're top 70 at stopping the pass, but overall, I mean, they have a very good rush defense. So if that's going to be an issue, like we saw with what Rutgers did against us, it might be another game where we might have to rely on Casey passing the ball and hopefully our line blocking for him type thing. But I think this is going to be one of those games where we will finally get to see this now Mickey Joseph led team against a much more stout defense and a much more stout offense of Purdue. We know that they're probably going to be passing the ball. I think I saw a stat that they're 62% of their plays, they're passing the ball. So they're more than likely, unless they start gashing us on runs and they stick to that, Aiden O'Connell is probably going to pass and air raid the ball out on us. I don't know the receivers offhand, but I know they do have a good core of receivers that are their playmakers coming back as well. But yeah, with that, 6:30 kickoff Saturday night, Purdue Btn Spread right now. Initially it opened up at 11. It's up to 14 now for Purdue. So Vegas is not chugging the Kool-Aid like we are, and rightfully so. Nebraska is 1-5 against the spread this year, so don't even blame them in the slightest on that. But I think this will be a very, very good conference test for Nebraska. Obviously, Indiana and Rutgers, not the best in the Big Ten, but in terms of where this program is right now, any game is not a guarantee that we're going to win that game. So we look at every opponent, and I think Mickey has the right mentality. He said, got 1-0 last week against Rutgers. You're 0-0 this week. You got to win the week. You got to go. You got to come out of Purdue 1-0 again. He's not looking at overall records. He's not, like he had mentioned, fake first place. He's not even looking at the standings. He's looking at, can you come out of Purdue 1-0 with a win type thing. So we can't overlook any team, and I know we had stated that last week, but in terms of actually good conference opponents, Purdue is going to be the first one that Nebraska will face this year, type thing. Because now that we know that Northwestern is absolute trash and everything else with that, we know that we haven't played the best conference team yet. So Purdue is going to be a good test to see, can Mickey get these guys ready? Can our defense kind of hopefully play consistently in fourth quarters? If not, pitch out another second half shutout when we need them to, type thing. But we know that Purdue is a very much more offensive minded team to start. But, we saw that their rush defense is definitely has stepped up more over the past couple of weeks here. But with that, we'll pass that to Nate there. Just your first thoughts, and if you have any keys to the game here for Purdue, go with that.
Yeah, so I think with the Purdue game, it's going to be, as kind of we've said, it's a night game at Purdue, so it's going to be more of a hostile environment than we saw with the supposed sellout in Piscataway. But
I think this one will be a sellout, but
yeah,
like a for real sellout.
Yep, I fully anticipate a little bit more action from the fans in that sense, and so it'll be hopefully something that we can feed off of. I know in a couple of press conferences they talked about they're excited to actually just be a part of an environment like that, and they kind of feed off of adversity. And so I know Mickey's actually kind of looking forward to being on the road in a game like that, in a game that really means something too. And so that'll be interesting to see. I know a couple of the coaches too have mentioned that Purdue is a very, I guess, senior laden team where they have a lot of upperclassmen that are getting a lot of snaps, and they don't play too many underclassmen. And so it's
the same thing that I've had with every Big Ten quarterback ever. It's like, how much longer are we going to play Aiden O'Connell? How much longer are we going to play Tanner Morgan from Minnesota? Like, Tanner Morgan should probably not be in college anymore, but I digress.
Don't forget Sean Clifford there.
Oh yeah, he definitely shouldn't be at college anymore either.
But that could be something we see where we're playing a lot of younger guys, and whereas Purdue is going to have a lot of those upperclassmen with a lot of experience on both sides of the ball. And so I know that's one thing that the coaching staff said that they're going to have to prepare for, is just really sound football from Purdue, where like you said, Andy, they're top 20 defense, at least against the run, top 70 against the pass, and they have a top offense in the nation as well. And so seeing really on both sides of the ball, if we can really clean things up and put together a decent 4 quarters against Purdue. I know with Purdue, they've only lost a couple games to 2 undefeated teams, Penn State and Syracuse.
Go Syracuse!
That doesn't necessarily give me a whole lot of confidence moving into it, but it's going to be our toughest test of the year thus far, I think, which is kind of strange to say, but it's going to be definitely a dogfight against Purdue that we're going to see. And so I think my keys to the game are really just playing 4 quarters, playing smart football. We got a offensive line is going to keep plaguing us unless something drastic changes, which I would love to see. But can our offense function in a way that they don't need to have stellar play from the offensive line necessarily? And can the defense limit some of that big play potential that Purdue is going to have with their upperclassman quarterback? And I think they have a couple wide receivers. I think their wide receiver room, like you said, is pretty deep as well. Mm-hmm. And so just seeing if our defense can really keep up with them and hopefully get some pressure on them as well. But I think it'll be a close one. I think it'll be a tough one, but I think it's a game that is certainly at least within reach. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Zach quick for any of his thoughts on Purdue quick.
It's unfortunate because for the longest time, my favorite joke about Purdue has always been calling them Purdon't. But they're unfortunately getting it done this year, so I can't really apply that. But I think my big key, outside of everything else you guys have said, is I want to see Nebraska play 4 quarters. We've had issues of either starting slow, whether it's the defense, the offense, whatever, and we've seen it in both games. I want to see them put together a complete game. And I will say that even if we lose, if we play a really, really good game and we stick with Purdue, because Purdue is going to come out and be really well coached, obviously. Jeff Brom is not somebody you overlook. He's been at Purdue. He knows what he's doing. And, I think if we can play a complete game, even if we lose, I think we'll still see progress. A loss at this point in the season will suck, but it's also I think there's still a lot that the players can take from it, even if they do lose. I'm still hoping for a win, obviously, but my big thing is I want to see 4 full quarters, and I think the coaches do too, and I think they're really working towards that. And I'm looking at some of the stats here, just comparing the two teams. It really, really is hard to look at some of this because of the Georgia Southern game allowing 600 some odd yards, because it really skews the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously we've seen a switch, but it's so hard to use the stats effectively in that regard because we gave up so many stats or so many yards on defense, and we've really brought that down recently. But overall, it looks like Purdue is just going to hound us because of how many yards we've allowed. But quite frankly, looking at this, we're about even. I mean, on paper, we're fairly even. I also question, and I know Purdue is good, and I know I asked you guys this as well, 14-point favorites. Like, college football in general is a sport that, I mean, unless you have a huge variance, and I'm talking like an Alabama and Citadel thing, and even that is a bad example, but like, unless you're talking like a team, like 2 teams like that are just absolutely 2 different spectrums here, which Big Ten play is not. And Nebraska, I think, is finally playing Big Ten ball. A 14-point favorite seems like a wild stat to me, or a wild prediction to me. But, I don't bet, so I don't care, honestly. It's not really, that's not anything that I worry about too much. It is interesting to see that Vegas thinks we're going to get blown out, basically, though. So beyond that, I think, I just want to see a full game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd love to see a win, but I also want to see how we do as we ramp up towards, the rise in competition as we go. We have 2 wins under our belt. No one thought we would have those 2 wins outside of, nobody really thought that we were going to be at this point. And so I think we've got a lot of momentum underneath us. And I think, Purdue is going to be a really great contest. I think it's going to be a fun game. And it's going to be just like this last week was, a roller coaster of emotions, I'm sure. And I might only be 28 years old, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to see a heart doctor if I keep going through too much of this Nebraska football thing, because my goodness, I was up and down, up and down, up and down. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how this game is going to go too. But I would love to be proven wrong. So Mickey, if you're out there, if we could win by 3 touchdowns pretty early, that would be great. But that's all I got. I'll pass it back to you, Andy.
Yeah, so just a couple quick points before we get into predictions and wrap this up here. Some key injuries I'll be kind of watching into the weekend. Is Quit Newsome and Luke Reimer were day to day. That was as of Tuesday that Mickey had set that, so it will be kind of interesting to see if we can't, if those guys aren't able to go, who kind of fills in. Definitely at Luke's role at linebacker. So hopefully, they're just kind of minors. They didn't really comment on what they're injured with, other that they're just day-to-day injuries. So we'll be interested to monitor that come Saturday if they're out there warming up and if they're practicing. with all that. I think Mickey speaks tomorrow before they leave, so maybe he'll give an update then, maybe he won't, but who knows. Other interesting bit of news that happened, I see Isaiah Garcia Castaneda is transferring out of the program. Kind of like a little foreshadowing, because we all saw Saturday that Tommy Hill was kind of warming up with the wide receivers. So that is interesting to kind of see
Tommy
him.
Hill has also made an official switch to wide receiver.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
don't forget that.
Yep.
So
No, yes, he did officially make that official switch. They announced that after the Isaiah transfer. So it's kind of like maybe that was a little foreshadowing of the Tommy Hill thing happened, then Isaiah transferred, and then they officially announced it. So maybe that was like the official, like our sign that we should have known that happened. But either way, Isaiah transferred. He had that one big game against Northwestern, thought he'd be the number one wide receiver, but then obviously Trey Palmer has emerged and taken over that role. So transferring out of the program. So who knows when we'll see Tommy Hill? Maybe Saturday, maybe future games. I know he played wide receiver in high school, so it's not an unfamiliar position for him, but just a little bit of interesting kind of transfer news and seeing him do that as well. They had also mentioned Omar Manning's also day-to-day, but we haven't really seen a whole lot of him to start the season at all, so don't even know with that. I also did think they said Mickey had mentioned that Gabe Irvin was trying to warm up Friday, but he's kind of dealing with a toe injury right now, which is why we kind of saw Gant kind of in that backup running back role. So also something to monitor is, if Gabe's not going, Gant's more than likely right now the presumed number 2. But I know they mentioned yesterday that they want to see Gant kind of get more of that workload because he has shown that he can be a good running back. He just, has to be more consistent about it. But just quick little updates we'll kind of be keeping an eye on going into Saturday there. Prediction-wise, this is kind of the one game where outside of Oklahoma, where I'm not sure how much of the Kool-Aid I will chug. I really want to pick Nebraska to win, but it's just one of those. I also want to be right at the same time and win predictions. So that's kind of where I'm at odds right now. Obviously, always scores by 90, but that's more of a mentality than an actual physical proof of concept there. But terms of predictions, I do think the offense gets back on track this week. I would love to be wrong, but I do think kind of at the end, Purdue, with just their veteran leadership, kind of pulls away towards the end. So I'm gonna go with we'll go 31-40 Purdue with the win there. Over to you, Nate.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's going to be definitely, hopefully, a dogfight. Hopefully, it's a close one that we can stick around in. I think Purdue's going to be a really good team. As we said, it's going to be a really good litmus test of how we stack up against the rest of the Big Ten. As for my prediction, though, I keep going back and forth on kind of how I don't know. I don't trust the 14 as kind of we talked about. That seems
I do think
pretty
Nebraska does
egregious.
cover the spread this week.
Yeah,
It's
I could
just
definitely see
I would
that.
agree.
it's just, are you going to cover it because you win or because you do lose by less than 14 type thing?
Yeah, and I'm trying to just think, is our defense going to step up and keep playing like they did against Rutgers, or were they able to step up and play against them because it was Rutgers?
Right.
And so that's kind of where I guess I'm having some trouble, but
I think if for what it's worth, obviously, the Indiana game, we pitched a shutout in the second half, but Indiana still moved the ball passing, which is what Purdue does. So that's kind of where I'm drawing my conclusion is like, if like Purdue can't run the ball and we show that our run defense can't step up, they're probably going to pass more and they're going to just pick on our young secondary, which has just been a problem all season in general.
Yeah,
And don't forget, Indiana did hang with Michigan for a while there, so Indiana doesn't necessarily look as bad. I think they just eventually got gassed, and Michigan was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." So
Indiana was too tired from the Nebraska game they had the week prior. So
I could see it.
But you know what? I think I'm gonna I'm going to say screw Vegas, screw the haters, 28-24 Huskers.
Ooh. God, I
It'll be a
really want
close
to do
one,
that.
but yep.
Well, crap.
I want to be right.
You're the deciding vote here, Zach.
I said I was cautiously optimistic, and I know that Purdue is really good, and I know this is going to be a roller coaster game, and something that I think, Nebraska's always played Purdue really well, and vice versa. Purdue and Nebraska always play really well. I think it's always really a good game. So I think this is going to be a close one. I think I still am stuck on 14 points being the dog line there for us. It seems wild to me. But I guess that's what they're thinking. So, but I am also going to say screw Vegas because I've had it in my head for some reason that this is going to be another Big Ten game. It's going to be another rough and tumble game. I also saw that the over under was 56. I don't know if I necessarily think that's going to happen either when I make my prediction here because I am going with 24-21 for the Huskers. I think it's going to be a real close game, and I do think the Huskers can pull it out. I don't think it's going to be I think it's going to be a pretty ugly game again, but I think now that we've got that extra day of rest, I do think we've been seeing it. I mean, we've been seeing not just momentum, but these changes are being made, and we're seeing the team is playing like a team, So I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm ready to get my heart broken, but
Making me rethink my pick.
It's also another night game. So, night games I think are also just big boosters for when you play in them. So that's my vote. I'm going 24-21. Let's go Huskers.
Man, you're really making me want to go 31-28 Nebraska now. Which is
that
seems more reasonable.
You've got until I hit the stop recording button to put that into existence. So if you're going to do it.
God, do I want to be right or I want to chug the Kool-Aid? Obviously the latter.
Kool-Aid.
We'll give it a peer pressure.
Remember?
I know. That's what I'm thinking
last time
too.
With Indiana, you were the only one that predicted we'd win.
Do it. Screw it. We'll go 31-28 Huskers.
Oh,
Or change it. We'll go back.
Flipping it.
We'll go back. You're right. You're right. I do remember that feeling of being the only one that picked Nebraska and being right.
I think it'll be exciting.
You're right. It's just gonna be a good game. I hope at least. If we get a better Big Ten roughing crew, it'll be a good game.
Absolutely.
But yeah, with that, we'll kind of wrap things up here. Of course, any of you guys have any thoughts, you can always hit us up on our socials, Facebook, Twitter, all of that. With that, we'll get this episode out here shortly. I know it's a shorter week for everybody to listen to this, but hopefully you give it all a listen. Some really good points in here, and we promise not to. Oh, I shouldn't say we promise. It might happen again.
Like I said, I will try better next time. I need to learn to schedule a little better. So on me, I'll take that and I'll reflect on it and I'll make it better for next time for everybody. So I apologize.
But with that, keep drinking the Mickey Joseph Kool-Aid. With that, go Big Red. I am Andy. That is my lovely co-host Zach and Nate. And as always, remember, if it's a possibility, it is a Nebraskability.